Right now in the One Piece community, there is a character that everybody's looking at when it comes to writing and just power scaling overall. And it's mainly due to his actions on Egghead, where people have decided to look at him and either judge him one way or another. Whether it's been negative or positive, personally I feel like everybody's missed the mark when it comes down to Kizaru. And so in this video I intend on breaking down both his writing and his power scaling so everybody can truly know who Kizaru is as a character. But before I get into the video, if you guys like content like this, you guys know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe, as I do post content like this regularly, and in my eyes it's a win-win. You guys show support and I'll give you guys more videos like this in the near future. Whether it's One Piece, other anime, or just fiction in general, in due time I will cover it, so be there when I go there. But I feel like that's enough rambling out of me, man. Why not just get into the video and truly show you guys who Kizaru is. Now before I get into the video, I'm going to tell you guys how I'm going to format this video, just in case you guys may want to skip ahead to see the power scaling or just stay here to see the writing. And so as I just said, the first part of the video will be about his writing, and then the second half will be about his power scaling. So you should be able to see the timestamps, and the timestamps should be able to just direct you to where you should go to if you want to see the power scaling or if you want to stay here for the writing. But I feel like that's everything I need to cover, so why don't I dive straight into the video. Now before I talk about his first actual appearance in the story, I want to talk about him and Sakazuki rising up in the ranks as they were kids. And so recently Oda did give us some information about Kizaru and Sakazuki, about them basically rising up through the ranks with each other. And this is key to Kizaru's character. I know at first glance you guys may be like, oh, okay, they just know each other from when they were kids, that's cool. But no, when you really look at this as a whole, you really get to see why Kizaru is the way he is today. As we know, Sakazuki is somebody that is on one straight path. It's absolute justice or nothing. But Kizaru, on the other hand, is quite literally the opposite. Kizaru isn't really clear about his justice, and that is a massive thing that I want to focus on inside this video. But before I take that massive leap into explaining it, let's go over Kizaru's first canonical appearance and then we'll get into that. Now when Kizaru first appears, he's obviously there to stop Luffy because Luffy punched the Celestial Dragon. And before he does that, he goes on like a little rampage where he's kicking everyone, he's shooting everyone, and he's just doing a whole bunch of madness before pulling up, and then Rayleigh has to stop him. Now in his conversation with Rayleigh, we get to see Kizaru's character put on display here, and it's very telling what type of person he is. All Kizaru does is follow orders. That's what he's there for. He's just there to follow orders, and he's just there to do what people tell him to do. That is how he sees it. That's why he's like, oh, I can't really let them go. And here we're able to see Kizaru's character. I remember before this we saw Sakazuki's and we saw Kuzan's character, and compared to those two, he seemed completely different. In Kuzan and Sakazuki's introductions, they give us totally different vibes, as yes, they were commanded to be at the places they were at, but the way they approached the situations were completely different. Now although I could go on about Kuzan's first introduction when he obviously meets the Straw Hats and he fights them, I really want to focus on Ohara, because Ohara is where you get to see their two conflicting ideals. Now in Ohara, the two of them were given the exact same commands, but how they approached the situation were two different ways. Kuzan decided to go on his own justice and see, well, Nico Robin isn't really that bad, she's just a child, let's just let her get away. But Sakazuki was like, no, everybody there has to die. And so already Oda has shown us what those two characters are like just from that one situation. Sakazuki and Kuzan are two extremes on opposite ends, and so Kizaru comes in here to balance them both out. But as we can see, Kizaru is indifferent to everything. He doesn't really take either side. And so then when you move past Sabaody to Marineford, you then get to see how they work as a trio. And in one of the first interactions we get to see on panel, Sakazuki and Kuzan clash, and you get to see how their personalities just don't mesh well. But then you get to see how Kizaru is very indifferent to it all. He's just like, okay, let's just continue to do what we're doing. He just doesn't pay any mind, but the two of them are immediately clashing. And so this is how their dynamic works. You got two extremes and one neutral. And this isn't the only dynamic in One Piece that goes like this. In fact, there's another marine dynamic that we get to see that nobody really pays attention to, but I'm going to shine a lot of light on it in this video. Before Sakazuki, Kuzan and Kizaru, you had Garp, Sengoku and Suru. Now through the dialogue and what we see through all of these characters, we are able to see that it's the exact same sort of dynamic, but the difference between these two dynamics is Sengoku and Kizaru. While Sengoku can play both sides and can play into both extremes, the difference is that he knows when to snap into gear for that, while Kizaru doesn't. Sengoku is somebody that likes to give commands, and he knows what he's doing with his own sense of justice. I mean, we get to see this through Kurazone, we get to see it through X-Drake, we get to see it through Law as well. And obviously we get to see this mostly with Law, since Law is a dangerous pirate, but yet he's still able to sit there and have a conversation with him and just have a heart to heart. But then when you move past that point with Sengoku, you get to see how he can act in battle and how cruel he can be. Marineford is a perfect example of how Sengoku can move, but with Kizaru he's forever indifferent, and we get to see this on Egghead. On Egghead, Kizaru is given a very simple task: kill Vegapunk. And so in his way is Luffy, and obviously we see how their fight goes on. I'm going to go over their fight later, but for right now I'm going to go over what Kizaru says during their fight. And before I even get into their fight, let's talk about his fight with Sentomaru and how that fight literally shows Kizaru as a character and why he is different from Sengoku. By this point in the story, it is clear that Kizaru and Sentomaru have a very close connection, as Sentomaru likes to call him uncle in certain translations. And so during their fight, Oda does show us a brief flashback, and then at the end of it, Kizaru does reminisce on how cute Sentomaru was. And through their fight and just their flashback in general, we get to see how Kizaru is as a person. He's very light-hearted, he's not as serious as he makes himself out to be. And on top of that, he does beg Sentomaru to just surrender. He doesn't want to defeat him, but Sentomaru pushes him to that point where he's like, okay, well, I have to deal with you. And so then when we move past Sentomaru, he has his fight with Luffy, and Luffy literally asks him, why do you want to kill Vegapunk? And what does Kizaru say? He doesn't want to do it. And so this is when Kizaru's character really does come out, and we get to see who he is as a person. And I feel like this also does shine a light on why Garp didn't want to become an admiral, because he knew that he would be put into situations like this, and that is why he stayed as a vice admiral instead. But during the fight with Kizaru and Luffy, we then get to see Kizaru have multiple chances to kill Vegapunk, but what does he do? He stalls. Throughout his fight, he does many different weird things, like he goes and grabs Usopp for some reason. It's clear that he doesn't want to kill Vegapunk, and he's just going around doing random things just so he can stall his time out and just lie in front of Saturn's face. And so then Saturn makes a comment about Kizaru being slower than he usually is, and so this literally gives you a massive telling to Kizaru not taking this mission as seriously as he's meant to, as he is having a mental war in his head. And so at this point, while he's lying down, Kizaru does something that a lot of people do not want to admit he did, but he did do it. Kizaru got up and decided to grab Luffy food to re-energize him, as during his fight with Luffy, Kizaru does say a few things that I feel like a lot of people do miss, but he does say that he knows that Luffy can tire himself out pretty quickly. Now, whether you want to say this is from his CP0 intel or just him knowing about Nika, which I'm going to get into, it's clear that he has some sort of intel on Luffy, and so that is why he gives him the food to re-energize him and let him and Vegapunk escape. But as we know, it doesn't go to plan at all, and obviously he's forced to kill Vegapunk, and this is when, at this point, he's just tapped out, and this is when he obviously gets thrown back into the ship. And when the marine soldiers ask him what's wrong, he then tells them that I'm not hurt on my skin, I'm not hurt anywhere on my body, I'm just hurt on my heart, and I'm mentally out, I'm checked out. And so here we're able to see that he is not built for the absolute justice route. Although he may seem like he is, and he may seem very indifferent, he's not. And that is why only people like Green Bull or Sakazuki can go down that route. But unlike Garp, Kusan and Fujitora, he can't go against what his superiors say, and so this is where he lands in that grey spot, and I think this is why a lot of people do misunderstand him. People are very easy to grasp onto absolute justice or their own type of justice, with obviously the two different sides, but people don't really understand how Sengoku and Kizaru function. These two have to learn to balance between the two. They have to learn how to lean to one side and lean to the other side during certain situations. And that is what makes Sengoku the perfect fleet admiral. And now you're probably thinking, well, why didn't he nominate Kizaru if he knows that Kizaru is just like him? And I'm gonna get into that. If you pay very close attention to the story, you'll know that all of the OG Free Admirals were mentored by Tsuru, Garp, and Sengoku. Tsuru mentored Sakazuki, Sengoku mentored Kizaru, and Garp mentored Kuzan. And it is very telling by the way all three of them act. And so now when you look at it and you're like, oh, Sengoku nominated Kuzan over Kizaru, isn't that a bit weird? And this right here does tell me that Sengoku doesn't believe Kizaru is ready for that major spot to where he can then make commands and tell people when to be a certain way. He sees that Kizaru isn't there yet where he can flip-flop between the two extremes yet. Kizaru just isn't there, he only relies on orders. And in my eyes, this is what messed up the Marines. Kuzan or Sakazuki shouldn't have been the fleet admiral, it should have been Kizaru. Why? Because he is the one in the middle. The one in the middle is able to give that perfect direction, and that's why I believe that every fleet admiral should be somebody that is is neutral, somebody that can flip between both sides, but as we know, Kizaru just wasn't ready for that spot. Another way you can also prove that he's very neutral is his actions that he takes while he's on Egghead, and especially Marineford. During Marineford, a lot of people like to say that Kizaru is high and wasn't taking it seriously, but I do think that Oda was giving us little sprinkles into his character here. When he's seeing that Luffy is about to free Ace, he shoots the key instead of Luffy himself. If Kizaru really wanted to do something to Luffy, he would have shot everybody up there or just set light clones to deal with them. Instead, he just shoots the key and goes about his way. This right here does tell us that he's very neutral. He doesn't want Luffy to free Ace, but he's not going to stop him because he knows how much Ace means to Luffy. And a lot of people do overlook this and just think, oh no, he's just being jokey. No, it's Oda giving us little sprinkles here and there, and he does it multiple times throughout the story. Many may attribute it to plot, but I see it as Oda portraying how Kizaru is as a character, and Egghead only proves my point even further. And so with that being said, why not wrap up the writing section so we can move into the power scaling section. In conclusion, Kizaru is very neutral, which is why he does do many different actions that are very confusing to the community, which is why the community doesn't really understand him as a character. In Egghead it was on full display, but in arcs prior to that, like Sabaody and Marineford, it was there, but it's not in your face like how it was in Egghead, which is why a lot of people don't really understand why he does the things that he does. Through us comparing to Sengoku and seeing our Sengoku acts, we're also then able to further our knowledge on this character to see what Kizaru is meant to be like, but due to how he is as a person, he hasn't taken that step towards being that. And in my opinion, I think that's what makes him one of the better written characters in the entire story. He's somebody that is different and has his own little flair. He's not easy to just catch on and know what his gimmick is like Sakazuki or Kuzan. He's somebody that is in the middle, and so you have to really look at his character to know what he is. And I think even with his flashback with Vegapunk and everyone where he's dancing around with Kuma and whatnot, I feel like a lot of people just be like, oh no, but he still killed his friend, he's evil. No, look at it for what it is. Kizaru was forced into a position where he didn't know what to do, and so he just followed orders, and he even tried to help Luffy to make sure Luffy could get away with Vegapunk, but as we know, Luffy couldn't do that. That is why I said come into this video with a very clear head and don't come in with an agenda mind that's like, oh but he killed his friend so he's terrible. No, Kizaru was forced into that position. It's like he's given a very hard task, and he was literally trying to help people to be like, okay yo, can you please escape with him, can you let me like fail my mission here? But at a certain point he's like, well I have to do my mission, and his mission was killing Vegapunk. And so with that being said, when I go into the power scaling section and talk about his power scaling, I've gone over Kizaru scaling multiple times in this channel, but what I'm going to do today especially is debunk all the nonsense around his name. I know I mainly did that in the writing section, since obviously the writing does really give you a toe into what he was doing on Egghead and obviously other places, but I just want to bring it up here as well so you guys really just understand how strong Kizaru is and why he's being undermined by everybody. Ever since his fight with Luffy, I've been saying that Kizaru wasn't taking that fight against Rayleigh seriously, and a lot of people have been like, oh but it's Rayleigh, of course he was taking it seriously. No, he wasn't. We know this because he didn't take out his clones to deal with the Straw Hats. All he needs to do was take out his clones, let them fight the Straw Hats, and then deal with Rayleigh himself. Kizaru pulled out his sword and started fighting Rayleigh, and Rayleigh was already gassed. I think this should tell you enough about how Rayleigh isn't on Kizaru's level. As much as people want to say that they're equal, old Rayleigh and Kizaru are nowhere near each other. And so then when we shift into Egghead is where Kizaru is mentally nerfed. Now if you want to go up against what mentally nerfed is inside of One Piece, then you're going up against what Rayleigh and Oda have already set inside the story. So what I'm going to tell you is that you may be a little bit stupid. I don't like saying or calling people certain things, but sometimes when it's written out in the story and you don't want to accept it, I'm not going to take you seriously, and I don't think anybody should take you seriously. And so with that being said, I'm now going to move on to their fight. And as we know, if Kizaru was mentally nerfed and Luffy wasn't really trying to defeat him, then the fight is a nothing fight. It's not really anything too special. And the whole pizza roll thing doesn't really make any sense, since he was literally there to stop them. He says he's going to stop them, so I mean it doesn't really make any sense. Plus Kizaru had just killed Vegapunk, so it's not really that big of a feat. Kizaru is mentally nerfed here to hell. He isn't even trying to fight Luffy, he's probably just trying to get off that island. So every time throughout the story he's fought, he hasn't really taken it that seriously, and so there isn't really a way that we can gauge his max power. But during his fights we're able to see him do cool things like hold off gear for Luffy, outspeed him and blitz him. That's something that Kaido needed Future Sight to do, And the points where he has to deal with Gear 5 Luffy, he deals with him as he should. And so when you look at Kizaru's scaling as a whole, you're really sitting there like, whoa, he hasn't really had a bad showing. And if you look at it with a clear head, you're like, whoa, I mean, in all of his fights, he's holding back in some degree. Though you can say that Luffy never used Advanced Conqueror's Haki, well, Kizaru wasn't taking that fight seriously. He wasn't there to fight Luffy and he was mentally nerfed, so those are two things that is on his side as well. So what would happen between our actual fight with him and Luffy? Well, we don't know that. But in my opinion, either way it's going to be an extreme diff fight. And so I would put Kizaru up in that top 10 range or top 15 to whatever sort of range. He's definitely up there in the verse. I feel like he's extremely undermined by a certain group of people, but I do feel like he's overhyped and obviously overstated by a certain community as well. If you look at it at a very neutral standpoint, you do know that he is a very hack-based fighter that can do a lot of different things, and so yeah, he's up there in terms of fighting capabilities. To briefly touch on his devil fruit, his light capabilities are endless, as we haven't really seen his full bag yet, but from what we've seen, he's pretty strong. How versatile light can be as a whole, he can do a whole bunch of things like create clones, create swords out of his light, and if we're being honest, he can do a bunch of things that we probably don't know of yet. His awakening could be so broken, as he could probably bend light and then use the rays that the sun has. So there's just a lot of things that Kizaru can do that we haven't seen yet, and that is why I do believe that he's one of the stronger people inside of the verse. And so with that being said, why don't I wrap up the video? Along with characters like Big Mom, who I really want to make a video about. If you guys want to see a video on Big Mom, I'll make a video on her. Kizaru is very complicated, and I feel like he's one of the more complex characters in One Piece. Yes, Kizaru is complex. If you don't want to believe that, then I'm not really going to take you seriously. He's definitely a more than meets the eye character. He's somebody that is extremely strong, with obviously advanced armor and haki and future sight and everything, and then obviously with his rank as well. He's somebody that, as I said, he's a complex character, so you really have to look into his character to understand who he is. I think that's enough out of me today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for the support, and goodbye.